Yeah, reports, you can re-layout them in RDLC. And if you tried it in 2009, it was kind of horrible. It took a tremendous amount of time, and there was a lot of things you could not do. 2010 Visual Studio, that is now the new designer for it, is actually a lot better. You can do way more with that one. So even if you decide to relay out in RDLC, you have a much better tool doing it that way. Then you can say, okay, I only need to upgrade the reports that actually is needed in here. And that's really the approach that will save a lot of time for you, because it's like figuring out which reports are not needed. That's the key feature. And I'm going to show you a little thing. It's actually Klaus Lundström that sits down there, by the way, that wrote about it in the blog post. But I just created a little tool in here that won't cost you anything to actually do it. This one is a 2009 database here. And I made a little hack in here because if you get a build that is higher than, oh, I'm actually getting ahead of myself, higher than this one, it's a little after the R2 build. So you need to get a new build for that one. But that means it adds a new feature in the designer in here. So if I go out here and look at the object in here, you have a new trigger in here in this code unit, code unit 1 in here. It has an on-report run, and then you can basically save a function in here. There is one trick to this one. I'll go look at my globals here to use the mouse. Look at functions, find my on-report run, and then look at my properties for this one. It has to be 120 in here. It's all in the blog post. But that trigger will be called every time a report actually runs now from the classic client. So if I go in and run from my order here, I go print this report. I now ran this report in here, and I should probably run another one, that the one I tested with before. So I run this one and preview this order in here. And then I have to do a trick in here because there actually is one problem about this function that is written in that blog post. It is that it cannot work on a lot of reports because let me go show the trick that is done in here. In the user time register, a table that is part of 20 or 3010, the base finance module, every customer has it in there. I added a few fields in here, a type entry, a time, and an object ID in here. So it's a free table. It don't cost you anything to do. It's basically just a few modifications. And every time I run something, it just dumps a transaction of the type of running my report in here instead of a time register. And then you don't have to buy extra tables. You have to implement this one in 2 objects, and that's it. So straight down here, by the way, is you can't use this one because you can't have an ongoing transaction and start writing and changing it. So it actually stores it in a temporary table and then dumps it when you close the company. So, yeah. Oh, it's Tuesday? Oh, okay. So it's not that, okay. So, yeah. So that was the part about consider if the report is needed in here. So you only need to upgrade the one that actually needs to be upgraded. And the one which reports that needs to be upgraded. If you looked in 5.0 or anything before that one, you basically only had one way of getting data out of NAV and putting it on a sheet of paper. That was by creating a report. So a lot of things ended up being reports. Now you can push it to Excel, of course, just by hitting the Excel button. So the only thing I really consider needing to be a report is anything that where you can say post and print or print pictures or anything like that one. That's the only thing I would consider to do in RDLC because it is more time consuming and there's much better tools for everything else and so on. The whole new queries, the OData, the web service interfaces allows you a lot of good ways of getting to it. The new Power Pivot in Excel where you grab data You can do anything you want with it afterwards. It's a free thing. Even the Jet Report Express allow you to do a whole bunch of things without it even costing anything. I heard about stories where customers, they needed to upgrade the system, and they came up with a price of $50,000 for doing the reports. And I don't think that's uncommon actually, that number. If you look at that one, yeah, you can need to do some reports, and that's maybe $20,000. Now you have $30,000 to go out and figure out what you really want to do. And you can go out and buy a decent BI solution for that one. That will give you way more than your old 100 reports had in your system, for example. So really look at what to do with reports, and don't just expect to go do all of them, because it's going to kill the project. It will be way too expensive. So yeah, and the session at the wrong time. What was it? People can see it in the schedule. So. Yeah, data ports. I don't think there's a lot of people that run data ports on a daily schedule, that they have data ports to run again and again. But they can be recorded as XML ports. Approach, and maybe is even better, is actually to just take the time now and create a code unit. And then you open up the file, you just read it yourself, you break it up in characters, and you can handle new versions, multiple versions of the format. You can use the XML, for example, also if you want, and open it up that way. So that's a much better way of doing it, I think, than the data ports. Data ports are great for implementing the system. I don't think you run them on a regular basis. So. Menu Suite, you can transform it with the tool. It's kind of the transformation tool in 2009 is what I'm referring to. It kind of works, but when you're done, I would say you need to do some more work on it. So it's like you get kind of a first approach. One thing to be really careful about with menu suites is if people have modified them and there had been kind of issues with one menu suite in their system, suddenly a whole bunch of menu items can be copied to the company menu suite that should not really have been there. It looks perfect. It's like you have the whole sales receivable, the whole purchase payables menu in the company menu suite. And as you start doing transformation on those ones, it don't work at all. It's like, oh, it works fine, but it's like next time some ISV come and plug something in, it don't work because you just overrule all the standard stuff. So I would suggest to run the transformation and then recode. So, and there's only 15 menu suites, so the task can't be hundreds. It's max 15 in here. The designer is extremely buggy, and it is in all versions of it. If you do one copy paste of something by accident, suddenly you will copy a whole sales receivable menu down in your menu suite and things like that one. So always look at the size before you start modifying, and look at the size afterwards. And if it's changed like hundreds of kilobytes, something is wrong in here. Then go export in text and delete all the last lines except the one you have in there. So it is very, very bad, and they've been that in every version since fall. So, yeah. The one thing that, except for reports, causes a lot of problems is all the discontinued functionality. File handling, where you used to have files on your own computer, you just open them and it ran some stuff on it, and it dumps some data in the database. It don't work that way any longer. Code don't run on your computer any longer. It runs on a service tier, and the service tier can't see your local hard drive. One option is just put it on a server path somewhere. 2013 is actually execute the code not as you any longer, but it executes as a network service. So do you want to have network servers have access to all your shared drives now? That's kind of an issue about file handling. So you can spend a lot of time getting that right. There is, of course, an upload and a download function where you can basically select the file locally and you will upload it to the server, and the server can then process the file. But then you have to figure out a way to delete all these temporary files that ends up uploading. Direct access to resources like printers and scale. People that know me know that I used to work for Lanham Associates that deals with all those kinds of things. It can be a tough thing to deal with, but wrap it in some kind of code, either with 2013.net, you can get to a lot of these things in a very nice way, actually. But you have to get outside of NAV to solve some of those issues now. OCXs and automation. In 2009, you had an option to run some of it server side, some of it client side. Now, because this server side runs as a different user, don't run as you any longer. Automation, of course, don't run there any longer either. So it only runs client-side all these functions, and I think OCX is basically almost it. So it's not going to be there much longer. So if you're going to recode something, look at the .NET interrupt, because you can do anything with .NET, the same environment that NAV is written in, and it won't go away for a long time. So don't go down the path of something that is a dying technology anyway, if you have to recode. So the other thing is obsolete functions, blob import and blob exports was deleted. A lot of people use those for attaching documents and things like that one. That's not a perfect replacement for them anyways, but there's some of those ones causing a lot of trouble also. Matrix forms, of course. A lot of people have that misunderstanding that you can't do matrix forms. And that's actually not true, because there's a code unit that actually deals with it, puts the data in there. You just have to feed the data in a nice way to that code unit, and you could probably do a matrix form with 10, 20 lines of code or something like that one by feeding the data into the structure, and it will pop up the matrix or something that looks like a matrix. It's just 32 columns of data, and that's basically all it's showing. But again, it's knowing the tricks, and a lot of those ones exist as blog posts out there, how to actually deal with it. Yeah. So I think that's what I want to go through about how the object is. I think the major hurdle I see is if you're using a lot of those functions that are discontinued, it can get real big problems. The other thing is if you're going to have a lot of forms and reports, go really reconsider what you want to do with them. So the database upgrades, that's the technical piece of it. What it actually do with the SQL database, it converts all code and text fields in the database from being ASCII or ANSI characters, 256 or basically just a byte, to being Unicode that is a 16-bit value in there. So if you have integration that works straight against the database, you're going to have a lot of issues with code and text fields, because they're not going to come out as code and text fields any longer. They're going to come out as Unicode. So all kinds of integration that works straight at the database can be quite an issue in here. It also only runs on SQL 2008. So if people have bought 2005 SQL servers all over the place, you have to go buy new SQL licenses to actually get to the 2008 version of SQL, or 2012, of course, also works. Same thing happens with Windows. So if you have deployed a whole old structure on Windows 2003 with 2005 SQL Server, I think, or that one, you need to go upgrade your whole internal structure also to actually get to 2013. So I think a lot of people, it's like you can get one server that do this and leave all the rest of it alone. So it's not like everything needs to be done. The conversion of data, of course, when it goes from taking 1 byte to 2 bytes, it also takes a lot more space in the database, but it also adds compression on it now. So it actually reduces the size of data also in the database. But it takes a lot of extra space when you require that one. Log file also get huge when you run these upgrade processes. So, yeah. The technical upgrades, when you need to do, so this one is just, you already did all the objects. You basically have a NAV 7 test database with a Kronos company in it, and everything works fine. Now you want to move the customer's data in there. There's no way to get around 2009. Another reason it won't die. The upgrade tool from 5.0 to 2013 don't exist. You go to 2009, and then you upgrade 2009 to 2013. There's huge differences what's happened to the data between 2009 and 2013. Basically with the dimensions, the whole things about the Unicode and things like that one. So that's why you kind of have to go to, you don't have to deploy it, but technically you have to go to 2009 R2 and upgrade that one. And that, of course, has a bunch of other issues. But then it's kind of like one of the old ones. It's like you do something before, you do something after. There's just a little more things you have to do in here. You delete all the objects out of the database. When you connect the development environment, it used to be the classic client to a 2009 database, it will ask you if you want to convert it. And if you answer yes twice, it will start going through the process of moving all the code and text fields from being single byte to being double byte in there. So That's the step that is actually different in here, where it runs a huge data upgrade. Then you import your new objects, you compile them, and then you set up a service tier, because the development environment can't execute code any longer. So to execute the upgrade toolkit, you need to have a working service tier. And you basically need to have menu suites that are kind of operational and things like that one, because if they won't compile, the service tier won't start. So you need to have, that's why I said this one up there, hey, you need to have your 2013 objects of your customers working before you can do anything. You can't run the step 2 before you have actually working objects, or semi-working objects at least. So yeah, and then you run it, and then you run the dimension upgrade. The dimension upgrade is, how many are aware of what it actually changed in dimension? Okay. Enough didn't raise their hands, so I'm going to tell it again. There used to be these document dimension table, post-document dimension table, ledger entry dimension table, and all kinds of things. And the worst one was the document dimension table, because you had the sales header, the sales line, the purchase header, and the purchase line, writing records, multiple records to the same table every time you changed almost every field. It was a very, very bad table. What they have now is just one table that basically is a combination. So when you look at it in a database from a customer, if you count all the different document combinations there is in there, you probably end up with less than 1,000, because it's like, yeah, when you select this customer, it's always this region. It's also always this salesperson. It's always this kind of thing. So the only thing that is now on the document, all these tables I mentioned before, by the way, are gone. There's now just an integer on the each line or each header, whatever it is, saying this one is combination number 102. When you used to post, it took all these dimension tables, it loaded them into a temporary table, it passed it off to the code unit, and the code unit did something, and it put it somewhere else. It was awful to program and change anything, because you had to do all these kinds of things to make it move in there. The only thing we do now is say, oh, it's combination 107. In the journal line, it just say combination 107. In the ledger entry, it say 107. That's nothing any longer. In a single line sales order posting, there used to be 1,100 transactions. There's 300 of those ones that have to do with dimensions. Now there's not a single one any longer. So it's huge what they did with that one. But the problem is, those tables, they have millions of records in them, or hundreds of millions in some customers. So to convert this one and get it back again, how do you do that one? You deal with a huge amount of data now. So they actually made something that they always told everyone not to do. They made a SQL script. So when you run this one, it asks you for the database name, the instance name, and the server name. Then it makes the script inside the SQL, and then it runs it. What they say is that it's running 100 to 1,000 times faster than if you try to run in the application code. You basically never finish in a lot of large customers. If you try this one, it runs really, really efficient. But it also gives you the clue how to make these tricks, so it's kind of not that good of a thing. Yeah. But it is a really neat thing what they did with the dimension. It's one of the very bad things about the 3.0 release. That was kind of it's the last cleanup, I think, from 3.0 that finally happened. So how to get it done? You can do in-house upgrades. And it requires a lot of special knowledge. You basically almost, I would say, need to dedicate people on it, because there's so many tools that needs to be run on a regular basis. And if you don't do it yourself multiple times, or almost do it every time yourself, it's going to be extremely costly for the customer if they're going to pay for you learning the tool all the time. So if you're not that big a partner, how can you then do it? It's like there's a lot of good outsourcing companies, and I see several of them in here, so I won't mention any names in there. But you can have anything from completely handoff, where they would actually deal with the customer completely, and they would just ensure that they actually get to the latest version. You can even have some where you kind of sign an agreement with them, and when the next version comes out, they'll do it for you again on a kind of a fixed price base. Then you can upgrade partly using those ones. It seems like now it's my customer, I want to deal with it, but I want somebody to have all this special knowledge to deal with the application code, to do all those kinds of things. That is an option too with those ones. So if you use small partner, I won't suggest that you actually start dealing with all this transformation tool and thing if you have not dealt with it. The learning curve on that one, if you start yourself, is probably in a month or so you will get efficient with it. And I don't think the customer want to pay for all that time of learning it. There's so many pitfalls in there that it's getting very, very dangerous to do. So, but again, it's like, I think it is, you can get very far if you know the tools that nobody, if they try to do anything manually, can actually do anything. So, yeah. So this one I think is a very important thing. And one thing I think I forgot to put in here that I actually wanted to do is ISV solutions. How do we deal with an ISV that is not there yet? And basically you just wait. Because if it's a small solution, of course, you can do something else. But if it's a big vertical solution, or in the case of land solution, for example, that is like hundreds of objects and complex code and all kinds of things like they deal with printers and things like that one, you don't want to do that yourself and try to do that one. So if the customer have any of these ISV solutions, you basically just have to put them off and say, hey, we can't do it until the partner is ready. The worst thing about ISV solutions are the ones that are not in business any longer. Because it's like now you have this kind of huge solution and you really have no good way of moving forward. There is a lot of tools that can, I can show you one of them in here. Again, it's you've seen it already. There is a function in here that actually can say renumber objects. You basically say this object in this range, I want to put it down at 50,000. You have to pay something for Microsoft for doing it because you need to now buy the tables, buy the forms, buy the reports, everything that's in here. But you can move it to a totally different range. This tool in here can actually also create a data conversion equivalent for it. So when you actually have moved the database to 2013, you run the conversion code unit, and it moves all the data down to your new tables. You don't have to write any code at all for doing it. Of course, I have to pay Microsoft for the tables. But if it's like, yeah, if it's like 20 tables, 100 forms, and so on, compared to sitting and working thousands of hours trying to figure out how to do their objects, it's a lot cheaper buying them from Microsoft and just renumbering to your range. And you're not really breaking anyone's IP if they're out of business, for example, so, or they don't want to deal with it and things like that. You can maybe even sell it back to them when you actually do it.